Hello, we are in Mark chapter 6 and 7, and we are in the midst of a section. Jesus is sort of staying in the home area, Galilee-ish, but he comes specifically to his hometown in 6:1. Uh, it doesn't go so well with him. So by verse 4, Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his own town." It says that he was not able to do a miracle there. Um, Matthew, if you remember when we went through Matthew, said that basically, sort of, he didn't because of their unbelief. So I would expect that's what he means by he couldn't do a miracle there, um, or not able to do a miracle there. That's probably the understanding that goes on. He healed a few sick people, but it does say right there he was amazed at their unbelief. So he went on teaching around the area. So he continues commissioning the 12, telling them to go off and share his word. Uh, the same sort of setup that he had before. If you're not welcome, then move on. And if you are welcome, then stay with that same person. It goes through the story of John the Baptist as you go through. Kind of interesting that this one adds a bit of a detail that it says because he had not, Herodias did not like John the Baptist, um, but Herod actually, despite the fact that John sort of insulted him, well, basically called attention to his sin in front of everybody for being with Herodias, um, that Herod feared John and protected him, knowing he was a righteous and holy man. And when Herod heard him, he would be very perplexed, and yet he liked to listen to him. So, an interesting sort of addition that Herod would actually listen to John and sort of be confused or perplexed. Um, the wording basically says he did many things, is the actual sort of exact wording. But it was an interesting thing that he was listening to John the Baptist. Who knows what have happened if this situation didn't come up where Herodias not necessarily tricks him, but kind of tricks him into killing John the Baptist. Um, and that is the end of him. So we go from there into the feeding of 5,000, very similar to Matthew. That it goes through. I love the line. They were like sheep without a shepherd, so we began to teach them. Right, that's what they need. What's what he means as a sheep without a shepherd, and he had compassion on them, so he began to teach them. And after that is the walking on the water. This one's a little bit different. So he made them get into the boat and go ahead. And as they're going, that's great. The boat was in the middle of the sea and he was alone on the land. He saw them straining at the oars because the wind was against them. Very early in the morning, he came toward them walking on the sea. This line kills me. I don't know why. And he wanted to pass them by. It was sort of like, excuse me, maybe you're in my way. I don't actually know what the wording is. When I was reading it, it always struck me as kind of humorous. When they saw him walking on the sea, they thought it was a ghost. And he said, "Have courage. It is I." That's I am, right? That phrase that from the burning bush, God's name. So have courage. I am. Don't be afraid. Then he got into the boat with them, and the wind ceased, and they were completely astounded because they had not understood about the loaves. Instead, their hearts were hardened. What does that mean? Well, this is a situation where he had just performed a miracle of creation. He had provided, who knows how many hundreds of loaves of bread and fish for these people. And they were still absolutely fascinated when he walked down the water and came across the sea. And so that's what it means. That's they didn't understand about the loaves. What he's saying is they didn't get that it's not just healing that he can do, that he is God. I am. He is that person, and he can actually even control nature. Um, which is a big deal, right? That's I think I've mentioned that before. Those types of miracles would have been set apart. So that's what they mean by they didn't get the loaves. It was like that was one miracle and it was good, but they didn't sort of click it together from there. So continues on. We come to the traditions of the elders. This is where they say, oh, your disciples don't wash their hands. Remember, that is not a cleanliness thing, that is a ceremonial thing. You are supposed to wash your hands with water dripping down and then up and then something. I don't remember how it works, but it is a man-made tradition that the Pharisees had put together or at least observed. And So the disciples didn't do that, right? And Jesus says, explains to them, you hypocrites, that you honor me with your lips, but your heart is far from me. You worship me in vain, teaching as doctrines human commands. Right. So this the phrase "you hypocrites" is basically pretenders. Those of you who are pretending to be holy. Um, and then he gives a great example. Whoever says honor your father or mother, and whoever speaks evil of them must be put to death. And then it says that if you call their money korban, that means you give it as a gift to God, then you no longer have any obligation. You no longer let him do anything for his father or mother, right? So it's a way of not taking care of your father and mother. So that would be a grave sin. Basically, it should be a pretty grave and obvious sin. You are no longer taking care of your mother and father. Remember, back then there are no safety nets. There is nothing going on, right? So if you don't do that, who is going to? Right? So to take that money, give it to the church, and then say, "Well, you're good." That's got nothing to do with me now. It was a way of evading responsibility and accountability that God would have assigned to you. So he's not very impressed with that, right? Um, so, and then interestingly, here we have continuing on when you get down to verse 15, sorry, it looks different on my screen than in my Bible. That's why I sometimes stutter and look at these things. So verse 15, he comes and he gets the crowd together. Listen to me, I'll understand. Nothing that goes into a person from outside can defile him, but the things that come out of a person are what defile him. So this is interesting, and it keeps going on, and he explains it a bit more, right? A little bit further down. But this Mark is very influenced, at the very least, very influenced by Peter, and that's clear in a number of spots as you go through his book. Some people go so far as to think that Mark is actually sort of a scribe for Peter. Some people think he just traveled together or used him as a reference a lot or whatever. There's different theories as to how exactly it goes about, but there is a pretty clear connection to Peter. So as you get into Acts, if you haven't read it before, you will, not too distant future, if you continue on this path. And in Acts, Peter's the one that has a vision of all the different foods and God telling him, hey, by the way, these ceremonial laws, they were in place for a reason in the Old Testament. That's not really the key to your heart at this point. They were used to sanctify the people of God in the Old Testament, meaning set them apart from others. But those things are ceremonial laws, no longer an issue in the new covenant, right? So this is sort of a preface of that. This shows up beforehand. So this is something that probably Jesus had said when Peter and the disciples were around, and they didn't fully get it. Because once you get to Acts, this isn't Peter's default position. He was still eating as a Jew. They were clean and unclean foods. And basically, he must have, that vision must have sort of come back to, hey, by the way, remember when I told you, right? Thus he declared all foods clean. Thus, remember when I told you all foods were clean, right? Hopefully you got that, right? So that is a neat little sort of side story that is going on. This is the story here. Gentile mother's faith is when Jesus goes up to Tyre. So he's sort of on the northern edge of where he goes. It's a Gentile area. So this woman comes to him who is a Gentile. She's a Greek speaker. And she was asking him to cast the demon out. And he said, and Jesus said to her, let the children be fed first. It isn't right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. And what he's saying there, I think it's probably in the native tongue, not as aggressive as this, but what he's saying is, I'm here to speak to the people of God right now. But she replies, Lord, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. Right? And because of that reply, you may go and your demon has left the daughter. Right? So there's another situation where her faith, she was acting and behaving as if Jesus was who he said he was, or he was Lord, the Messiah, the Christ. She was behaving that way, and therefore Jesus rewarded that faith, that behavior, that understanding of who he was, um, with this miracle, right? But from our modern sensibilities, this is a very tough one, an interesting, tough passage. And I think it's good to sort of think on some of these things. And we have a very, very independent society. So, particularly in the United States, and particularly in New Hampshire in the United States, where we want to buck any idea of authority. But the Bible is not written that way. The Bible is written sort of front to back with authority structures in it. It's hierarchical by nature. It expects hierarchy, and it is a natural and native thing in the Bible, and I think in creation. And that's something that challenges us. And I think that's good for us to say, how do we deal with authority? How well do we deal with authority? Right? Because God placed those authorities, and it's all through the Bible where it talks about, obviously, God is in authority over us. We reject that and we want to rule ourselves. We want to make a name for ourselves. We want to do things ourselves, right? Define good and evil ourselves. So that's sort of the main story of the whole Bible. But then you get into um, fathers and mothers and their children, and it says to follow them. That's authority, whatever. And we don't do that well. It says inside the family, in a marriage, that the husband is the head, and we don't do that too well. It says in the church, the elders are to lead. Sometimes we don't do that too well. It says in our nations that the civil authorities are there for our own good and they are leaders and we should respect them. And oftentimes we don't do that well. So it seems like we're failing over and over, despite the fact that God has put us in this type of society where authority is natural and to a certain extent unescapable. And yet we as people, particularly right now, really rebel against that, myself included at times. So I'm not sort of preaching to you saying, hey, you don't listen to authority. That's something that we all struggle with as a culture. It's something that we don't do well culturally right now. And I think it's just interesting to ponder on because it's just something that's so foreign to our culture. And I think that foreignness, that individuality, that sort of selfishness seeps into so many parts of how we read scripture and how we interpret it without us realizing it. We don't realize that we're in the water, if you know what I mean, as fish, and we're just swimming in it. And we think that's sort of okay or normal or natural. But that's not really how it's laid out biblically as you keep reading. So, and then we finish with one more miracle. A deaf man who had difficulty speaking. Jesus heals him, uses Aramaic again, be opened. And it says they were extremely astonished and said, he's done everything well. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. It's sort of I think this might be a culmination sort of thing like, hey, wait a second now. This isn't just, some simple healings. This isn't what he's done miraculous healings of all different types. He has walked on water. He has calmed storm. He has made something out of nothing in terms of feeding the 5,000. He has done some crazy, crazy stuff. So I hope you're blessed. That's it.